The first thing I saw, before the batch cutter, before the HR rep's Botox smile, was my own damn face staring back at me from the reception desk, taped up with scotch tape like a mugshot at a liquor store. The caption in all caps Sharpie said, "Do not allow her back inside." I hadn't even grabbed my purse yet. Security hovered at my side like I might shiv someone with a paperclip. I looked at the kid, early 20s, probably ex-military based on the posture, now babysitting boardroom fallout, and gave him the kind of slow nod that says, "I'm not gonna scream, but I could burn this building down if I wanted." Behind the plexiglass, HR's Lorraine was doing that thing women do when they want to act compassionate, but also deeply enjoy your humiliation. "We appreciate your service, Allison," she chirped, as if I'd just completed a Girl Scout camping trip and not architected the only compliance framework standing between Avenir Holdings and a 9-figure class action bloodbath. Greg Langford watched it all from behind his glass-walled office, leaning back in his Eames knockoff chair like he'd just conquered Troy. He didn't wave. He smirked. That kind of smug little boy expression you only earn by stepping on someone smarter than you and not realizing the ground beneath you is already giving way. I said nothing. I let Lorraine take the badge. Snip. A final click of the shears and 21 years of institutional memory hit the bottom of a plastic tray like loose change. I left my company-issued laptop on the conference table, exactly where they asked, but as I turned to go, I slid my right hand into my coat pocket and curled my fingers around a small metal rectangle. My personal flash drive. The one with the things Greg never took the time to learn. If you've ever been blindsided like that, cut off, erased, made invisible, I want you to do one thing right now. Subscribe and like this video. It helps the team tell more of these stories, and frankly, it tells the algorithm we're not just screaming into the void. Because 97% of you won't. But you should. Because what happens next, it gets real. Outside, the wind hit hard. October in Chicago doesn't care about your job loss. I lit a cigarette. First one in 8 years. It tasted like burnt hope. Across the street, I saw the digital ticker outside the firm scroll past the words, Avenir Holdings, accelerated merger finalization. That part made me laugh. Out loud. Like really laugh, sharp and bitter, like the first laugh at a funeral when the tension finally splits. Because what Greg didn't understand, what no one did, is that this merger wasn't just about assets and valuations. It was about risk architecture. It was about continuity. It was about me. I wasn't a name on a chart. I was the damn key. And they just tossed it out with the recycling. The messages started before I'd even hit the parking garage. One from Monica in legal. WTF just happened? Another from the analytics lead. They just purged your folder from the deal archive. Like completely gone. You okay? I didn't answer. I walked slowly to my car. I sat inside. And then I opened the center console and pulled out the second flash drive. The one with my personal audit trail, dated, encrypted, cross-referenced. I didn't need revenge. I needed consequences. And I'd already built them. Quietly. Legally. Precisely 0.6 months earlier, I was sitting alone in conference room B at 11:47 p.m., with a half-eaten vending machine granola bar, and an open binder that smelled faintly of toner and career disappointment. The deal wasn't even public yet. The board hadn't approved it. But I knew what was coming. The whispers about acceleration, the strategic leaks to Forbes, the absurd idea that Avenir Holdings was going to merge with a global logistics giant without choking on its own compliance tail. That's when I found it. Clause 6.4, buried in the integration readiness packet from the DOJ's Risk Assurance Manual. Not new. Just ignored. It wasn't written in bold. It wasn't even underlined. But there it was. Point of contact termination without certified handoff invalidates prior federal pre-approval under subsection D, triggering rear review and liability disclosure void. Translation? If I left and wasn't properly replaced through a documented regulatory handover, the entire merger would trip a kill switch. No signature, no continuity, no go. Simple. Brutal. Invisible to anyone not fluent in the art of bureaucratic survival. So I built around it. Quietly. I registered every compliance credential under my name. I structured the audit trail, So the point of contact ID was woven into the API keys used by our federal risk portal. It wasn't ego. It was defense. Because I've seen what happens when executives cut corners. They think the deal lives on paper. I knew it lived in process. When I presented it to the board's legal liaison in April, he blinked at me like I was quoting Shakespeare. "That's pretty arcane," he muttered. I nodded. Until it's not. Greg Langford wasn't in that meeting. He was too busy hosting an off-site strategy brunch in Napa, getting his photo taken next to champagne fountains and calling it thought leadership. I was in a windowless war room writing the legal language that would keep the deal from unraveling under federal scrutiny. When he finally skimmed the framework, he said, and I quote, "I don't get why we need this many signatures. Feels bloated." He called it bloat. The thing standing between Avenir and a $310 million breach of disclosure suit. But I didn't argue. Not because he was right. Because I was tired. Tired of explaining systems to people who thought power came from titles instead of knowledge. By July, my credentials were active. My name was baked into every approval checkpoint. SEC, DOJ, CFIUS. My email was listed as the sole liaison for federal oversight. My phone number, direct line, printed on every agency form like a silent lifeline nobody noticed until they'd need it. Greg never asked how it worked. He thought merger approvals came from vibes and bravado. When I offered to walk him through the architecture, he laughed and said, "We've got vendors for that." I nodded and made a silent note in my folder. He doesn't understand the kill switch. I even emailed HR a month later, just to test a theory. If my role were to change, I wrote, would there be a formal compliance transition plan? Their reply? Per Greg, your duties are not client-facing and can be reassigned at management's discretion. I screenshotted that, dated it, saved it to the flash drive. Because this wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. And in this line of work, the invisible key isn't the one you turn. It's the one you take with you when you walk. The invite never came. I checked my calendar 3 times that morning, refreshed Outlook, even asked Monica in legal if she'd heard about the exec ops meeting Greg was supposedly hosting in the West Conference suite. She just shrugged, "I's nervous. I think it's just senior leads." I was senior leads. I built the goddamn integration schedule. They were probably slapping their names on as we spoke. By the time I walked past the frosted glass doors, Greg was already mid-pitch. Standing in front of my risk architecture slides, rebranded with new fonts, stripped of all legal nuance, he gestured like a TED Talk wannabe and announced, "We're simplifying the merger timeline. Streamlining unnecessary bottlenecks. We don't need layers of review slowing us down." Bottlenecks. That's what I'd become. Not the architect of a risk-compliant merger. A speed bump in a 20-something's power fantasy. The legal counsel, Rick Halperin, looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. He opened his mouth once, then closed it. I could see the thought crawl across his face. Say nothing. Ride it out. Don't get tagged as difficult. He wasn't spineless. He was calculating. But I knew exactly what he was doing, preserving his exit route while mine was being prepped for demolition. My phone buzzed at 10:14 a.m. calendar update. Routine HR check-in, 10:30 a.m., conference room 3A. Routine my ass. Lorraine was already seated when I walked in. She had 2 manila folders stacked neatly in front of her. A bottle of smart water sat untouched by her elbow like a hostage prop. Greg was there too. No pretense. No transition. Just straight into the line. "Allison, thank you for joining. We've completed a strategic review of departmental overlaps. And unfortunately, your role has been deemed redundant." I waited for the punchline. Nothing came. No offer to transition. No discussion of reassignment. Not even a prepared lie about shifting business priorities. Just that one word. Redundant. I looked at Lorraine. She avoided eye contact and pushed one folder across the table. Inside, my exit paperwork. Minimum severance. No extension. NDA attached like a slap. I asked one question. Calm. Controlled. Who's taking over regulatory point of contact? Greg blinked. It's being restructured under business ops. Business ops. A catch-all. A corporate junk drawer of interns and spreadsheets. No registered compliance liaison. No federal credential access. No idea. And just like that, I knew. He had no clue what he'd just done. They hadn't fired a middle manager. They'd severed the only verified thread connecting this company to the legal viability of a $310 million deal. I stood, smoothed my coat, took the pen Lorraine offered but didn't use it. I slid the folder back. No need, I said quietly. I won't be signing anything today. Greg's nostrils flared. Then we'll consider this a voluntary departure. I turned to the door. No, Greg. You'll consider it whatever your legal team tells you to. In about 48 hours. And I left. No drama. No tears. Just that ice-cold hum in your veins when you know someone just pulled the trigger on their own downfall and thinks they're holding the gun that I stepped out through the side exit. Not the main one. They always try to funnel you through the front like some ritualistic cleansing of memory. But I knew that door would have interns pretending not to see me. Greg still perched like a smug gargoyle in his glass tower, and that damn photo taped to the desk like I was some domestic threat to office furniture. No, I took the freight hallway, past the cold vending machines, and the echo of a decade's worth of layoffs. The wind outside slapped me like it had been waiting all morning. October in this city is honest. No question. Just blunt force air, and the kind of chill that makes you question every life choice, starting with wool blend slacks. I stood there, coat barely buttoned, heels clicking against the cracked pavement, and lit the cigarette I swore off 8 years ago. Marlboro Gold. Emergency pack from the glove box. First drag tasted like regret and gunpowder. My phone started buzzing before I reached the curb. Derek from Ops. What the actual hell? Just heard. Monica in legal. Tell me this is some mistake. This has to be a mistake. Natalie from the data team. They're saying you walked. No one believes it. Then one message. No greeting. Just a screenshot. My name, Allison Grant, had been removed from the integration credentials log. Blank space where it used to be. Timestamped 15 minutes ago. I stood there staring at it, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the cafe that didn't ask questions, ordered a black coffee I wouldn't drink, and took the corner table under the outlet. Slid my personal laptop out of my tote. Plugged in the flash drive I'd taken with me like a lifeline. Inside it, a folder named Redundancy. Subfolders, DOJ SEC Internal Audit, CFIUS, and one labeled 6.4 Trigger Chain Draft. I connected to the secure server I'd set up months ago, when the board first started asking questions like, how replaceable are our compliance liaisons? And Greg made jokes about dusty binders and dinosaur clauses. Upload complete. Encrypted. Redundant. Timestamped and mirrored to 2 offshore backups and 1 anonymous Dropbox with legal view access set for 48 hours later. That's when I felt it. Not rage. Not sadness. Control. The kind of quiet, glacial control that builds beneath the surface and makes the earth shift when nobody's watching. I didn't need a keycard anymore. I had the system's blueprint. And I just pulled the thread they didn't even know was holding it all together. In the gleaming executive conference room. Greg Langford stood before the board in a perfectly tailored navy suit, radiating the unearned confidence of a man who thought charisma could override code. He tapped a key on the wireless clicker and beamed as the final slide transitioned on screen. Merger finalized, ahead of schedule. The room broke into muted applause. Someone popped the champagne early. Greg raised his glass like Caesar returning from conquest. Gentlemen and ladies, this is what modern leadership looks like, he said. No red tape. No delays. Streamlined execution from start to finish. He didn't mention my name. Not once. The final packet had gone out just 20 minutes earlier, submitted to the acquiring firm's legal department with all signatures, except mine. My countersignature box had been deleted from the PDF entirely. In its place, not applicable, position vacated. Halperin from legal looked pale. He hadn't spoken much since the documents were signed. He'd offered one quiet protest before Greg cut him off with a glare and a condescending, "It's under control, Rick." Meanwhile, in a data center hundreds of miles away, the acquiring firm's federal compliance bot began its sweep. It was automated, blind, and ruthless. It scanned each document, each signature, each digital marker. Then it hit the verification node linked to the DOJ's risk framework, specifically the liaison credential ID tag to Allison Grant. The system paused, queried the agency registry, returned a status: non-verified, terminated, no succession record filed. Flag: critical integrity breach. Triggered clause: 6.4 Risk Assurance Protocol. Invalidated pre-approval due to breach of continuity and misrepresentation of compliance contact. Action: immediate merger hold. Escalate to General Counsel. Alert both parties. Back in the boardroom, Greg was still riding high, joking about renaming one of the integration units after himself. Langford Logistics, he said, grinning. Has a nice ring to it, right? That's when Halperin's phone buzzed. He read the notification once. Then again. He didn't sip his champagne. Didn't move. Greg noticed. Problem. Rick swallowed. His voice came out low and clipped. We've just been flagged by the acquiring firm. Clause 6.4. They're escalating. Greg frowned. What the hell is Clause 6.4? Halperin didn't answer. But I could've. It's the clause I highlighted 6 months ago. The one that states, termination of registered compliance liaison without formal succession process renders all risk pre-approvals null and void. Deal must be resubmitted from origin. It doesn't kill a merger. It buries it in legal concrete. The kind that takes 6 months to dig through, if the acquiring firm still wants to. And spoiler alert, they won't. Because from their side, it won't look like an accident. It'll look like fraud. And Greg? Greg just signed his name to all of it.at exactly 2:42 p.m. A single-line email landed in the inbox of Avenir Holdings' executive team. Subject line in all caps: urgent merger status. The body read, merger voided due to material misrepresentation of compliance status. All integration is halted. No greeting. No signature. No room for negotiation. The room Greg had been holding court in moments earlier fell into silence, like someone had killed the oxygen. One of the junior VPs actually laughed out loud, until she realized it wasn't a prank. Greg's smile cracked. What the hell does that mean? They can't just void it. But they could. And they had. Within the hour, Avenir's stock dipped 11%. By close of day, it would hit 19% and trigger a temporary halt. News hadn't hit the wire yet, but institutional investors were already whispering. The term material misrepresentation wasn't just bad PR, it was legal napalm. In the war room, chaos brewed. Phones rang non-stop. IR scrambled to draft a damage control memo. No one would approve. The CFO, a gray-haired lifer named Ray Matheson, stood frozen in front of the conference screen, rereading the email for the 4th time. They're saying we lied, he muttered. Greg barked. We didn't lie. We filed everything by the book. The documents were signed. The timelines were accelerated per board approval. You removed her name, Rick Halperin cut in. Greg spun on him. Excuse me. Rick was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm you get when you know you're about to watch a man hang himself with the rope he proudly wove. You removed Allison's name from the integration log. You erased her credential. You submitted final documentation with no registered compliance liaison and no formal transfer. That's a breach of Clause 6.4. She was redundant, Greg snapped. She wasn't critical. You signed off on it. Rick shrugged, leaned back in his chair. I said we should wait. You overruled. Ray, the CFO, suddenly looked up. Something clicked. The kind of click that makes a man feel the heat of liability roll up his spine. Wait, Greg, was her credential still active when you terminated her? Greg blinked. What does that matter? We submitted everything without her. It's clean. No, it's not, Rick replied. Because by terminating her without filing a regulatory succession plan, the acquiring firm now sees the pre-approvals as false. That's the misrepresentation. Ray turned away from the screen, hands on his hips, pacing now. Oh my God. You didn't just fire her. You fired the key holder. Silence again. Then Greg exploded. You're throwing this on me? We're all on this deal. Everyone signed off. But no one backed him. Because they all knew. Even if they hadn't known what I built, what I controlled, they knew now what they'd lost. Not just the director of regulatory strategy. The spine of the entire damn deal. And the worst part? There was no one left to call. Because I hadn't just left quietly. I had made sure silence would echo louder than any press release they could buy. The first call came at 3:08 p.m. unknown number. Straight to voicemail. Then another. Then two at once. Then four. I set the phone down on the windowsill, screen up, volume off, and let the chaos accumulate like dust. Each vibration felt like a miniature apology from a system that thought it could erase me without consequence. By 4:10 p.m., I'd clocked 34 missed calls. 14 from numbers I recognized, CFO, legal, HR, even a desperate attempt from the front desk, and 20 I didn't. Likely the acquiring firm's people outside counsel, maybe even a few damage control firms. Greg panicked and dialed once the media team started whispering stockholder lawsuit. I didn't answer any of them. I was home. In the upstairs office they never knew about. The one with blackout curtains and a high-backed leather chair that Greg once called paranoid bunker chic. It was quiet. Peaceful. I'd made tea. Not because I needed it, but because rituals matter when you're watching a kingdom burn from the comfort of your own castle. At 4:16 a text arrived. From Ray, the CFO. They're sending a team to your house. Please talk to them. I stared at it for a long moment. Just stared. Not out of anger. Out of something colder. You don't get to exile someone, and then send a delegation when your empire begins to crack. You don't tape someone's photo to a security desk and then beg them to unlock the front door you slammed shut. I walked to the kitchen. Boiled more water. Took my time. Outside, down the long driveway, I spotted them. Two black SUVs crawling like repentant beetles. The same kind of cars they used to shuttle executives to closings and retreats. Now rerouted to a suburban cul-de-sac like missionaries begging for a lost soul. They parked slowly. A man in a trim navy suit stepped out. Probably legal. Another, taller, in a wool coat. Greg, undoubtedly. I could smell the desperation through the glass. They didn't ring the bell right away. They stood there a few seconds, talking in low tones. Then Greg marched forward and rang twice. Not long, not aggressive. Polite. Like we were still colleagues. He rang again. And again. My phone buzzed on the windowsill. A new text, this time from Monica in legal. Please. They're saying if you just sign a retroactive credential handoff, they can refile. The deal's salvageable. You're still the primary on record. You always were. That was the moment. Not the phone calls. Not the SUVs. That sentence. You're still the primary. Because I was. I'd never revoked the credential. Never reassigned it. Never hit delete. The login was still active. The digital signature still validated. The liaison status still tethered to one name. One line of continuity. No one had even thought to sever properly. Mine. I could have answered the door. I could have salvaged their little empire with one email and a 3-minute phone call. But I didn't. Instead, I sat in the dark upstairs and watched Greg press his forehead to the doorframe like a man praying to a god he never believed in. Until he needed a miracle. And I thought, it's funny how loud silence gets when you finally hear it from the other side. The knocking turned into pounding. Then the doorbell rang again, longer this time, like maybe holding it down would melt the wall between desperation and forgiveness. I stayed where I was, upstairs, seated in the armchair by the window, hands folded around a ceramic mug that still radiated warmth. Lemon balm tea. Calming, ironic. Down below, Greg had lost whatever composure he arrived with. He stood on my porch flanked by a man in a charcoal trench coat, probably Avenir's outside counsel, and a younger assistant who kept nervously glancing at the security camera by my door like it might shoot darts. One of them had gone to the neighbor's house at some point. I watched poor Mrs. Tierney shake her head and gesture vaguely toward my window. She didn't know I was behind the curtain. She just knew I hadn't come out. They called again. I let it go to voicemail. Again. Greg stepped forward and raised his voice, not quite a yell, but loud enough to reach the second floor. Allison. Please. Just give us the signature. We can fix this. Fix this? Like it was a scuff on a whiteboard. Like all they needed was the right magic ink to make their arrogance vanish. The lawyer pulled out a folder. He held it up like a priest offering sacrament. It's a retroactive compliance attestation, he called out. You sign it, we file it, and the acquiring firm reopens the timeline. You're the only credentialed liaison. They won't talk to anyone else. Greg added. You'll be reinstated. Compensation. Title bump. Public apology if you want it. This is salvageable, but we're out of time. The mug felt warm in my lap. I didn't blink. Just watched him flail against the decision he made with surgical confidence 3 days ago. He thought he cut out dead weight. He hadn't realized he severed the artery. I set the mug down, opened my laptop, and composed a short email. To General Counsel, Howell Global. Subject. Credential status confirmation. Please see my prior communication. I am no longer employed by Avenir Holdings. All representations made on my behalf are unauthorized. No greeting. No fluff. Just the only sentence that mattered. I hit send. Downstairs, Greg was pacing now, phone to his ear, shoulders tight. The lawyer looked at his tablet, saw the incoming reply, and froze. He turned the screen to Greg. Greg stared, then slumped forward like someone had unplugged the last thread of ego holding him upright. They didn't knock again. They didn't wave. They just walked back to the SUVs, one by one, heads low. The engines turned over, quiet and smooth, and the cars rolled back down the driveway with all the elegance of a funeral procession no one stayed to watch. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. Not out of satisfaction, but clarity. Because sometimes, revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's just telling the truth louder than the lie they tried to replace you with. And letting that truth echo through everything they thought was untouchable. 3 days later, I was back in the same coffee shop where I'd uploaded the audit trail. Corner booth, same cold countertop, same flickering pendant light that never got fixed. But this time I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. The headlines came in one by one. First, a bland corporate update from Avenir. Due to unforeseen procedural complications, our merger with Howell Global has been formally dissolved. Then came the investor alert. Then a leak. Someone from inside legal, probably Monica, quietly confirming to the Financial Herald that the cause wasn't external. It was internal missteps. Translation, Greg Langford. By Friday he was out. Not with a bang, not with a press conference. Just a hushed board decision, one line in the morning brief. Effective immediately, Mr. Langford will no longer be serving in an executive capacity at Avenir Holdings. He didn't even get to resign with dignity. I heard through the grapevine he tried to push for an NDA package, but HR laughed him out of the room. When you're the reason a $310 million deal detonates on legal grounds, you don't get a golden parachute. You get the door. Avenir's stock dropped another 7% that morning, triggering more investor exits. They tried to plug the hole with forward-looking optimism and a few desperate outreach campaigns, but Howell Global wasn't returning calls. Once a risk flag like that goes live on federal systems, it's tattooed into your due diligence profile for years. No one wants to merge with a company that doesn't even know who holds the keys to its own compliance vault. That afternoon, a courier showed up at my house. No badge, no delivery truck, just a young man in a black jacket and a polite, curious smile. For Ms. Allison Grant, he said, handing over a single cream envelope. Heavy stock. Wax sealed. Inside was a handwritten note. Actual ink. Slanted cursive. You were right to walk away. Some people only learn value by losing it. GC Howell Global. I read it twice, then tucked it into the top drawer of my desk, beneath the flash drive labeled Last Line of Defense. Later that week, I had to stop by a nearby office building. Nothing dramatic, just a meeting with a client 2 floors up from my old life. But as I passed through the lobby, I caught a glimpse of something taped to the side of the security desk. A photo. My photo. Still there. Edges curling. Paper yellowing slightly with time. That same grainy ID image they'd slapped up the day they tried to erase me. Do not allow her back inside. But someone had added something new beneath it. Scrawled in thick black Sharpie. Too late to ask her back. I smiled. Because they were right the first time. They locked me out. I just made sure the deal couldn't get in either.